All right, guys. So welcome in to an episode here. The Baltimore Ravens playoff opener is officially set, and they're going to kick off their divisional round matchup against the Houston Texans. And I got a special guest on here to help us break it down. I got an excellent content creator, an elite Twitter troll, film study guru, a father of two, guest writer for the Baltimore Ravens, a Mark Andrews clone, Ravens expert, Cole Jackson of Road Graders on YouTube. Cole, welcome into the show. Honored to have you on. How's it going?
Thanks so much, brother. That is an intro. I love it. Bringing the
Yeah, man,
energy.
you had quite the resume.
Yeah, seriously. Twitter troll has to be my top hit though. No, I'm doing good, brother. I'm doing good. I'm excited to finally get on here and cut up some ball with you. We're in the thick of it, folks. I mean, we were waiting, and now we know who we're playing, and it's playoff football. There's nothing better than this. So let's go.
Yeah, man. So we'll start off on our initial thoughts of how'd you feel about some of how it shook out a little bit with some of these games. Now we had some upsets, the Packers putting it on the Cowboys. We had the Texans absolutely blowing out the Browns. Kansas City handedly beats Miami 26-7. And then the Steelers the Bills handled the Steelers. So what's your initial thoughts on how this all shook out in the first round?
It's been really interesting. Some boring games, and then yesterday, you got a couple, or you got a solid one in Detroit against the Rams. But I'll say this: how did I think it was going to go? My bracket is 1-for-5 so far, and I was 0-for-4 going into the Bills game today. So don't follow me for any betting advice or any game picks because that ain't my forte apparently. And I also have the Eagles beating the Bucks. They're losing right now. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been really interesting. I definitely, I thought Cleveland was definitely going to beat Houston. Like I was pretty all in on that. I just thought Cleveland's defense was going to be too much for a rookie.
They laid an egg, man.
And that's it, right? Like Flacco, what's the saying? The princess turned into a pumpkin or whatever. It was that kind of magical ride that just kind of turned into a blunder, and it's kind of what you expected from a 38-year-old journeyman quarterback. Put up some good numbers, moving through, but then he kind of turned into who he was. They just had a really good game plan for him. And then I thought, I tweeted it out early in that Kansas City game. It's like, oh yeah, remember, like, Kansas City's actually really talented. Like, did everyone forget?
Yeah.
How good
Mahomes
can be?
In the back of my head, I was like not worrying about Kansas City this year. I don't know why, because they won 2 Super Bowls. Patrick Mahomes is an absolute stud. They have a great defense, and I'm just kind of in the back of my mind, Chiefs, whatever. They just don't look the same. And then all of a sudden, they show up in the playoffs, and we're like, yeah, this is the Kansas City Chiefs.
Exactly. And I didn't, and I mean, the Dolphins were who they were all year. They beat up a bunch of below 500 teams, and whenever they had to play someone over 500, except for the Dallas Cowboys, it basically backfired. So, that kind of played out. Green Bay, what a story. What a story for Jordan Love. The Packers keep drafting first-round quarterbacks, letting them sit for 2 years, and then they turn into studs, I guess. I think people are going to have to think about that when they start kind of thinking about, these non-early quarterbacks. I think it's a really interesting conversation to have, but super interesting one in that. I have two of my closest buddies. I lived with them in university. They're huge Cowboys fans, so I had a lot of fun in the group chat with them, giving it to them.
Yeah, I have a friend too that was in my fantasy league this year, and I almost feel bad for the guy because he said, he's like, guys, is this going to be another year where we just don't live up to expectations? Like, he already knew in the back of his head that it wasn't going to work out for him. And I just, as I saw the Packers just beating the crap out of the Cowboys, I was just like, man, I feel for this guy, because I know how it feels. Us as Baltimore Ravens fans, when you're feeling pretty high, you're beating up on some teams for regular season. You got the 1 seed. I think the Cowboys had the 2 seed, but nonetheless had a high seed. And then all of a sudden, a team that barely sneaks off into the playoffs, like the Tennessee Titans, like the Green Bay Packers with the 7 seed, they just boom, punch you right in the mouth, because they don't care what your record is in the regular season. That's what makes the postseason so fun. So
yeah, that's exactly it. And let's be realistic. That's our reputation right now over the last few years as a team that can't get it done in the playoffs. And so, I mean, the Cowboys a little different because this has been going on for They have like 4 playoff wins since the year 2000. So I mean, that's a longer term organizational thing. Even under when Tony Romo was there, that was always kind of the storyline. But the Ravens got to go out and prove it this week, or else people are going to start saying the same things. Great regular season team can't get it done in the playoffs. I think it's a little bit of a flawed storyline right now, just because it's lacking the sample size.
Right.
But, if it happens again this year, like it happened in 2019, it's going to be hard to shed that.
Yeah. And that's what I remember. It was like that narrative you're talking about. I remember Marlon Humphrey saying it after, what was it, the 2019 game? He's like, yeah, we're just a team that chokes in the playoffs right now. I can't get it done when the lights are brightest. But like you said, the sample size hasn't been really there. When's the last time we saw Lamar in the playoffs? 2020? And he got a win against the Titans. And in the next game against the Buffalo Bills, he gets concussed with the ball snapped 20 feet over his head, running into the back of the end zone with not even a chance to try to come back.
Oh, we're going to talk about that O-line tonight.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, man. So so here it is. The matchup is set. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to play the Buffalo Bills, and the Baltimore Ravens will be playing host to the Houston Texans. Are there any matchups that you can think of off the top of your head with the Ravens versus the Texans that you feel like the Ravens can exploit, or that you feel like maybe the Texans could try to exploit?
It's a great question. I think one thing that I've seen from watching, so I just got done. I basically just got done my breakdown that'll be out tomorrow morning on what to expect from CJ Stroud, what he did so well against Cleveland. And I want to be very clear about this, because when I started kind of preparing my notes, I was like, I'm kind of making it sound like CJ just took advantage of busted coverages. And that's not really how I feel about it. CJ threw dots in this game. He's been so impressive. So this isn't a disrespect thing towards him, or I'm not taking anything away from him. But the reality is, in this game, the Cleveland secondary blew 3-4 coverages that led to big plays, including a couple touchdowns. The Brevin Jordan touchdown, they had 2 guys basically covering the chip and then not releasing, neither one released. So communication error there leads to Brevin Jordan being wide open. That deep Nico Collins pass that he caught leading to their first touchdown basically happened because Denzel Ward just bit on, or not Denzel. Yeah, it was Denzel Ward. He bit on the double move with no safety help. You had another play in that game where it was the play that CJ actually missed. The safety he's in cover 4, and he just stepped up on a crossing route that was underneath him, and nobody covered Nico. So, I mean, it was just one of those things where if you think back to early last year, what were the Ravens secondary doing the most? They were giving up those big plays. Yeah. Since then, when they kind of adjusted, when they got settled into Mike McDonald's defense, you think about all year this year, what's the one thing you didn't see was big plays. They just weren't giving up those explosive big plays. Mm-hmm. When they gave up big plays, it was usually catches and runs, not necessarily shots over your head.
Yeah, I can think of like DK Metcalf earlier in the season when he had that big catch and run. I think that was a slant over the middle where he just kind of found a little bit of separation underneath of the defender and just catch and ran, because he's a fast guy. And I feel like that's been the couple of times we've been beat with explosive plays, a lot of catch and run. I can think of the one time that Marlon Humphrey gave up the big touchdown to George Pickens where we got beat over the top. But again, that wasn't even a busted coverage. That was just George Pickens beating Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah.
So what you don't expect to happen 9 times out of 10, usually trust Marlon Humphrey in that situation. So definitely encouraging to see the lack of big plays that the Baltimore Ravens defense is allowing, because I really do think, and that was one of the things that I saw and I was writing down about these Texans, is that they're super big play reliant. They don't have a rushing attack. In fact,
even their run game's big play reliant. You go back and you take away the toss that went for 32 and then the 19-yard touchdown or 23-yard touchdown. I think his average, if you take out those 2 runs, was like 3.1 for Singletary. So it's just, that's not how they've been getting it done. They've been, he's been a great goal line back. I actually think he runs through contact really well. But what he's really doing is converting any big runs. And that's why, like, my big matchup is going to be Mike McDonald versus CJ Stroud. I think that's what advantages the Ravens the most. He's put so many quarterbacks in a blender just with the disguised looks. And that's the thing about the Cleveland Browns defense. You go look at them, reminds me a lot about what Dean Pease used to do. you line up, you got your 4-man down line. You're not really doing a whole lot. You're not disguising your coverages. You're not disguising your defensive line. You're just playing straight up against them, and you're talented enough to do it.
Just saying, we like our guys versus your guys.
That's
Go
it.
hunt, 4-man rush. We'll play man with some too high. Like, yeah, absolutely.
McDonald couldn't be more opposite. It looks different every play. It's actually frustrating to study if you really want it from a film study perspective, because I gotta go on Google. I'm constantly trying to look up things to make sure I understand what I'm seeing. Like it's a grind. But it's what he's done so well. You saw Michigan just do it, basically running the same system under Zach Minter, who basically just took Mike McDonald's playbook and kept things going. They just won a national championship doing it. So I mean, it's just one of those things where that's tough for a rookie quarterback. It's gonna be tough for a team that's missing a couple weapons. Noah Brown goes down. You're basically down to Nico Collins and John Mechie. Shout out to the Canadian. Love that for him. Coach just said it well right there. Browns play checkers and Ravens are playing chess. That couldn't be summarized better. But by Coach Evans there, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this, like we were talking about with Houston's rushing attack, how reliant they are on the big play. And here's the numbers here. The Texans rushing offense is ranked 30th in efficiency, averaging just 96.9 yards per game, which is 23rd in the NFL, and 3.7 yards per carry, which is number 29th in the NFL. So we're talking about bottom of the barrel when it comes to their down in and down out rushing attack, like you said, being kind of big play reliant on the ground and through the air. One matchup that I'm looking at is our tight ends versus the Texans, because, and I'll even go further than that. I'll say their linebackers and safeties and coverage versus our running backs and tight ends, if we can get those type of matchups, because I was doing a little bit of digging and I found that the Texans run defense is excellent. We're talking about they're allowing 3.5 yards per carry, which is second best in the NFL. And they're sixth best against rushing yards and running backs, 76.8 yards per game. But against the pass to these running backs, they're 22nd, allowing 34.6 yards per game. So whenever running backs get out in space and you have these Texans linebackers that like to run downhill, it seems like you can get some favorable matchups there. And then again, matching up our tight ends versus the Texans. And I want to say Mark Andrews did not play in this first matchup that we had with the Texans, and Isaiah Likely only had one catch for like 4 yards, I believe. So I think that Todd Monken could implement the tight end a lot more heavy than he did in the first matchup, because check this out. The Texans are 26th in the NFL, allowing 5.34 receptions per game to tight ends, and they're 27th in yards per game with 56.4 yards per game to tight ends. So I think that we could find some favorable matchups against their linebackers and or safeties with our running backs and tight ends. And that is something that we've seen kind of a surgence of with Justice Hill getting some action as a pass catcher, where we're just letting them leak out, running some wheel routes, letting Lamar hitting him on the check down. And he's having some success with it. So what do you think about us possibly trying to exploit some of their linebackers and safeties and tight end and running back coverage?
I could not agree more with you. You go back and you watch. I'm gonna have a video out on it. What's tomorrow? Tuesday. I'm gonna have a video at Wednesday showing that essentially the only way the Browns passing attack had success was through their tight ends, hitting on them on the seams, or in breaking crossing routes. A guy like David Bell had like 8 catches, and he just kind of works out of the slot, works the middle of the field. That number 53, Blake Cashman, I think is his name. Not overly familiar with his game, but he really popped to me as a guy that just really struggled in coverage in this game. He against the Browns, he just really could. And they have pretty good corners. Like, Derek Stingley, we all know how tuted of a prospect he was. Desmond King. Right. Desmond King might be one of my favorite players in the league to watch. He's just little physical slot corner. I love players like that.
Yeah.
Jalen Petrie as well from the kind of free safety position where they play him in some overhang roles.
Mm-hmm.
But Blake Cashman really struggles. You get Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely up against a guy like that. I think they can really exploit them. I like the way Christian Harris has developed there, but he's kind of playing that will linebacker role. He's really focusing on the running backs. You're going to see a lot of Cashman taking those kind of middle of the field hook coverages, and that's kind of where Njoku feasted. David Bell was making catches. They even had Amari Cooper starting to kind of, he'd play that downward slot and then work the middle of the field. So that middle of the field is Lamar's favorite area to attack. So I think that's a matchup that really works well for them. And that's without, looking at the tight end stats where, Bryant and Njoku combined for 11 catches for 150 yards in this game. So that's really where they had the majority of their success. And most of that came over the middle of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a question here, or I guess Texans have no film on how we're going to use Dalvin Cook, big factor. Do you think we're going to have Dalvin Cook active if you had to make a prediction right now?
I think he's going to be active. I think he's probably your third running back. I don't think they brought him in to not use him. I think if Melvin Gordon doesn't fumble, you're probably not going to see Cook active this early. Is Dalvin Cook going to play a lot? I really don't think so. If he had an over-under on 5.5 carries, I'd hit the under on it.
Okay.
I think they know what they have in Gus and Hill. I think they like what they have in Gus and Hill. And that's kind of, you throw in Cook, it's just a little bit of a wild card without him having, kind of the regular season. It's unfortunate we couldn't get him in that last game against the Steelers just to get some reps, right? Just to kind of know what you're looking like with this offensive line. I'd be shocked if the playoff game is the time they release Cook. That's just my opinion on it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think about it, get a little bit nervous because, how many running backs play in a system like the Ravens have where they have the RPOs and the mesh points with Lamar Jackson. I think about who Dalvin Cook has played with, and it's been Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson, Kirk Cousins, like not the most
mobile cats in the league.
Yeah. So I don't know how much he's been repping those RPOs and stuff. So that makes me a little bit nervous, but I also think that they could trust Dalvin Cook to get in there on third down and pass protect and possibly get on some wheel routes. Like that's at the end of the day, like those type of routes and stuff, that's just football. Like, hey, Dalvin, I want you to go run a wheel and go beat your guy. Like, I think he could contribute in that manner. Do you have any other matchups or kind of other ways that you feel like we can exploit this Texans defense before I get on to my last matchup?
I think big thing in the pass game, that would be my big thing is I want to see a game plan like they did against the Dolphins where, they didn't come out and try and hammer the run. I think we're going to be able to throw the ball on these guys. I'm not sure we're going to be able to run the ball a ton on them, at least in in an efficient way. It's one of their kind of fortes. They got some beasts up front. I think when you look at our defense, one of the better, like Laramie Tunsil's an eraser, right? And so Laramie Tunsil being, a top 3 tackle in the league this year, really advantages their offensive line because they're able to then slide protect, help out guys like Juice Scruggs, help out guys like George Fant. You got Shaq Mason on the other side of the right guard position, who's, one of the top right guards in the league. So they kind of got, left tackle and right guard are their two strengths, and they're able to do a lot of things in their protections to work both those guys. So I think this is a game where I just see Mike Macdonald focusing more on the simulated pressure, sending different looks and not necessarily blitzes, because you might show 6 and still send 4 and you're dropping a defensive lineman and sending a linebacker, that sort of thing. But one area I do think they could really attack them is runs to the edge. I think that's an area where you can kind of run at a Will Anderson, run at a guy like Jonathan Greenard. Where that becomes challenging is where you have guys like Desmond King, you have guys like Jalen Peter who come down, run that alley really fast. But that's going to be more effective than running up the middle against Rakins and Collins and even Khalil Davis getting in there a little bit. So, because, it's Baltimore football. They're going to try and run the ball at some point. But I really think it's a Dolphins type game plan for Monken where, you kind of use the pass to set up the run.
Yeah. And that was kind of my last key matchup here because they have had a weakness against explosive pass plays. So I think that if Lamar Jackson has his deep ball dialed in and we can connect on some balls downfield, that would be absolutely fantastic. And I absolutely would give, I'm a little nervous for the game. I'm not going to lie, because it's the playoffs, man. It's just, you never know what's going to happen. But if the Ravens can connect on some big plays, I feel pretty comfortable about the Ravens' ability to win this game, because they actually have a guy right now starting at the safety position for them, a guy that we had here in Baltimore on our practice squad. That's DeAndre Houston Carson.
That's right.
And he was signed off of the Ravens practice squad on Halloween to the Texans. And the Texans have actually allowed 91 explosive completions this season of gains of over 16 yards, tied for the sixth most in the NFL. And I think about how Odell Beckham Jr. had that big catch in week 1. I think about how Zay Flowers had some success with yards after catch. And I think their efficiency against wide receivers here, let's see if I have it in my notes. Yeah, they're actually 20th against wide receivers, allowing 160.2 yards per game. So they're 27th in yards against tight ends. In the passing game, they're 20th against wide receivers in the passing game, and then they're 22nd against running backs in the passing game. So, and then all to the opposites, I mean, they're elite against the run. So if you're, like you're saying, man, if you're Todd Monken, you're not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, I'm going to try to, have 35 rushing attempts in this game. No, I'm going to let Lamar Jackson get the ball to these playmakers. So I think that's a great point here. Do you think, so the Ravens have been employing a really unique strategy here, and this is your forte, so I'm going to let you take the reins on this and just tell me everything you think about it, if it'll continue or whatever. But the Ravens have been using a rotation with their offensive tackles, right? With the
crazy
player, Falele.
Craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, you just don't see it. It's so weird. So let's dive into the trenches, how on both sides of the football. We'll start with the Ravens offensive line ability to protect Lamar Jackson, because we're talking about this pass-heavy game plan that we think Monken is going to employ. We know it doesn't matter a single lick if you can't give Lamar Jackson time, and they got some dogs up there that can rush the passer, like Grenard that we're talking about, and the rookie Will Anderson Jr. So do you think we can protect? And do you think the Ravens should keep rotating their offensive tackles?
I'll start with the offensive tackle one, just because I've reached out to a lot of folks, just kind of pick their brains. And, I was talking to Qadri Ismail about it on Bobby and Sarah's stream. And it was just, he's a guy that played in the league, and, he said, I've never seen it. And it's one of those things. There was, I can't remember who the coach was. It was like in the 90s, the Dolphins used to do this. Might have been early 90s. Can't think of the coach that was the famous coach there. I'm young, whatever. But that's the only time that I've really heard of that being a thing. It's super rare. We've seen it in Baltimore under Coach Joe DeLisandris. They rotated in 2020. They were rotating Fluker and Tyree Phillips. We saw a guard rotation. We've seen rotations as part of their strategy. What I've liked about it is that matchup within the matchup, where you have a game and then you have a pass rush matchup within that football game that's going on. And what that does is it gives a defensive lineman a completely different look. You go from a Ronnie Stanley to a Patrick McCary. You go from a Morgan Moses to a Daniel Falele. I think what's going to make me nervous, I don't want to see a whole lot of Falele. I don't think he's ready. He's not a good fit for Todd Monken's offense. It's just, 5-man protections where he's kind of naked on that side, no chip. It's just not his strength. He was a much better fit for the Greg Roman, down blocking type offense. But I don't mind it. If it's keeping these guys fresh, if it's giving them a little break. We know Ronnie's playing with a bum knee and his ankle's never going to be the same. And you got Morgan Moses on the other side playing with a torn labrum. That's tough, right? And so if that's giving them a little bit of that rest time to kind of get right, and since they've started doing it, the month of December was the best month out of this offensive line. And that came with that. So, I mean, that's when I look at the O-line and what I'm expecting, I think that's very positive to look at the most recent play, because, they had some stretches where they really struggled. Ronnie was getting up there in that kind of 7 to 8 to 9 pressures allowed type games. That's really tough. Now, what I will say I'll have a video out probably Thursday or Friday on this. I took a look. I pulled clips on kind of Greenard, Will Anderson, Miaje Sanders, if everybody remembers him.
Coming out of
Cincinnati.
What was that? Yep. Cincinnati, yep.
in
I
that
remember
year that
him.
they made that big run. And then they got Derek Barnett, who made some plays last week, who they signed from Philly. They cut him. And so what I guess gives me hope is these are true speed rushers. You know, you look at a guy like Greenard, you look at a guy like Anderson. Those aren't necessarily the guys that have given Ronnie Stanley fits. It's the
Like the
guys
Trey
that,
Hendrickson.
that's it. Like guys that
Yeah.
convert speed to power rushers that are able to attack that inside and really attack his anchor where that's his weakness, right? It hasn't been necessarily him getting run around. He's still got his movement skills. What he doesn't have is his ability to bend and absorb through his anchor. So I think the matchup specifically with these pass rushers is one that gives him a little bit of an advantage there. I think where the most pressure is going to come is because Ronnie's big strategy right now is short cornering. So he's going to take a little bit of a less depth in his vertical set where he's kind of setting shorter and allowing a guy to kind of get to his hip. And then he wants to push him out the back of the pocket. And what that's doing is forcing Lamar to step up. But where he's stepping up into is, you know, a guy like John Simpson has to have a good game. Linderbaum needs to drop that anchor. Zeitler needs to play clean. So it's going to really pressure that interior offensive line and those matchups with Collins and Rankins and some of those guys rushing from the inside. Also, look, now the guy that I think could secretly give you a little bit of a fit in this game is a guy like Jerry Hughes. If he's playing a lot of snaps, he's kind of been playing more of a 5-tech. That is a guy that will give you a power rush game. So that's a guy that I'd look for as an X factor for that Houston defensive line.
Okay. Let me get to this super chat real quick. Shout out to Don C. He says, Noah, love the live streams. Do more. Cole, I watched 5 different Ravens YouTube content creators shows. You were on 4 of them. Great collab, guys. Yeah, shout out to Cole for just being the absolute weapon of the Ravens content creation space, where he just comes in and drops knowledge all over the place with his film expertise. So shout out to Cole for coming on. I appreciate you, man. So I don't know if you got a chance to hear the podcast on the lounge with Ronnie Stanley, but I believe that he did say that he was kind of altering his technique in order to kind of overcome the issue with the bending or whatever. Have you seen any improvement, or is it just is what it is at this point? You know,
no, absolutely. That short corner technique that he's using, it's basically, if I short corner you and don't give you as much of a runway because I'm not getting out in space with you, you can't really drive me as much because you're going to then shorten your space and try and bend inwards towards, you know, that's where you get guys that'll, you know, it happened a lot in that Cleveland game where about 3 occasions Greener just ran around the tackle, right? And that's where you get some of those highlight plays, like from a Von Miller type, you know, where they're just bending around guys.
Right.
But Ronnie's movement skills are still pretty good, where he's not necessarily getting guys that are grabbing his chest and driving him backwards, because that's what was happening. Basically, he was getting driven right into Lamar's lap. So that short corner technique, I did a video a few weeks ago on it, just because I thought that was something that I noticed him purposely doing, because he's always been kind of a vertical set and square up tackle. And then I saw him just like not getting any depth in his vertical set. And I was like, he's got to be doing that on purpose. So to hear him say that on the lounge gave me a little bit of confidence, a little swagger in my step for kind of acknowledging that was kind of his technique. So I think that's part of why he's been playing better lately. Again, I think the downfall to that is it really puts a lot of pressure on the rest of your offensive line, specifically left guard, center, because it's, you know, when I'm going to ride that edge rusher out the back of the pocket, Lamar's got to step up if he needs space. And that's just going to mean that those guys can't be giving up a lot of depth, or else he's going to be stepping up right into them. Right. So that's kind of the give and the take with that.
Do you think that the Texans have those guys on the interior of their pass rush? Because I know they're elite at stuffing the run. We're talking about the 3rd overall run defense and Malik Collins and those other guys you were talking about. Are they kind of a one-trick pony? Are they more like Brandon Williams, Michael Pierce, like, you know, run stuffers? Or do you think they got some real juice as pass rushers as well?
They're not the juiciest types of pass rushers. Like, I think Malik Collins would be more of a pass rusher than Sheldon Rankins. He's had a few really, really solid games, but he's more of a pressure guy where he's not really getting the sack production. He has 7 on the year, but 3 of them came in one game. So he's been pretty quiet. Actually, 5 of the 7 came in just 2 games. So he's had a lot of zeros on that board. But he's one of those guys where he's a little bit more disruptive than he necessarily is getting directly to the quarterback. Sheldon Rankins doesn't necessarily, scare me in that. He's more of that kind of anchor player. I think he only had 30-ish pressures on the year. I remember I did a piece on it. I think he had 40 on the year, and 9 of them or 10 of them came in one game. So it was just weird games where these two guys kind of popped off as pass rushers.
Just gotta hope that doesn't happen against us.
That's it, right? So I feel good about that one. If you go back and look, like I think in Sheldon Rankins against us only had 1 hurry. He didn't register a QB hit or a sack. And then if you look at a guy like Malik Collins, let me just pop it up here just so we can take a look. He had 2 pressures, 1 QB, one QB hit, 1 hurry. So I mean, 3 pressures between the 2 of them, and 21 pass rush opportunities, pretty limited, right? So we kind of handled those guys early. I think we'll handle them again. It's really going to be that battle with the speed rushers on the outside.
Sweet. So there you have it. The offensive line overall, do you think we can kind of keep Lamar Jackson pretty clean for the most part? I mean, we've seen Lamar Jackson do some special things when he has been pressured this year. My only, when I look at this game in the big picture view, right? I look at, CJ Stroud and the Texans don't turn the ball over much. I think they have the lowest turnover rate in the NFL. And I know for a fact that CJ Stroud has the best touchdown to interception ratio in the NFL. And my only concern is if we start to turn the ball over and then our defense can't get some of those turnovers back, because we've been a very, turnover heavy defense. That's been part of the reason why we've been absolutely blowing teams out, because when we have the ball, we can score, and then we get the ball back a lot because our defense led the NFL in turnovers and takeaways. So from kind of a big picture perspective, I get worried if we start to turn the ball over. Maybe we have a fumble here, there, a fluky interception. I think about the 2019 game where Lamar throws it to Mark Andrews over the middle of the field on one of the first plays. It bounces off his hands. Safety gets in from behind. Overall, do you think that we can contain enough of their pass rush and pressure to where Lamar Jackson will have success?
Yeah, I feel good about it. I really do. That's not taking anything away from Greenard and Anderson. Those guys are dogs. I just think their style of pass rush, I think, matches up a little bit better with our guys. Versus a guy like when we get to the Chiefs, we're gonna get to the Chiefs. When we get to the Chiefs, that'll be a little bit of a different matchup because they got some power guys, and that's where I get a little bit nervous. You got a Karlaftis, you got Chris Jones that they sometimes will stretch outside, guys that can really push the pocket and collapse it. So those are the guys that make me more nervous than the speed rusher types. Not to say, speed rushers are the guys that are, able to get around the edge, get into the blind side, strip the ball, right? So, and I've said it, if you go back through the years, everybody focuses on Lamar Jackson and what he's done in the playoffs. If you go back to 2019, it's always come with 2 guys beside each other that are struggling. Offensive line play, it's a weakest link type of game. You're only as strong as your weakest player. Mm-hmm. With the Ravens, it's been you're only as strong as your weakest duo. And what I mean by that is you go back to 2019, you had Bradley Bozeman at left guard when he should have been at center, and you had Matt Skura at center. Those 2 got absolutely bullied by DeQuan Jones and Jeffrey Simmons. You go to 2020, you had Ben Powers at right guard and DJ Fluker at right tackle with some Tyree Phillips. 2 guys not very good beside each other, right? So this year, you fast forward, where's our weakest link? You're looking at the left side right now if you had to pick 2 guys. You're looking at Ronnie Stanley and John Simpson. The success in this game for the offensive line is going to become from the left tackle and the left guard. I know Linderbaum's going to go out there and play a rock-steady game. I know Kevin Zeitler is going to go out there and play a rock-steady game. And Morgan Moses, he can give a couple pressures. That's who he is. He gives up, a couple pressures. He might give up a sack. But it's not going to be all day. You're not going to come away from this game saying, oh, God, if Morgan Moses could have just played better. It's going to be what happens on that left side of that offensive line. They're going to go as far as those 2 take them. Win in the trenches, protect the football. That's how you win playoff football.
Sweet. I love it. So let's break down the other side of the football real quick. Let's flip it over. We got some dogs on our side of the defensive line as well, and that's why I get a little bit of some excitement about our defense against their offense, because I look at our secondary. We're talking about the Texans, who have a really pass-heavy attack. They cannot run the football, and I think that gives a little bit of advantage to our guys that can really pin their ears back some and just say, hey, we're going to rush the quarterback. And if you get a couple chunk runs on us, you get a couple chunk runs on us. And we got linebackers behind our defensive line like Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen who can clean stuff up if a running back slips through. But I just think that the game plan has to be for the Ravens, don't give up the explosive play. And let's go get after CJ Stroud. Let's hit him early. Let's hit him often. I believe the Ravens had 5 sacks against CJ Stroud the first time they matched up, and I believe they even lost some guys on their offensive line since then. But I think you mentioned Juice Scruggs earlier. I don't think he played in the first matchup, so we'll see how that looks. But we got Justin Matabike, we got Odafe Owe, Jadeveon Clowney, Michael Pierce, Travis Jones, Kyle Van Noy, guys that can really provide complimentary rush, against any offense, any given weekend. How do you feel about this matchup with the Texans?
There's some parts that I really like. You go back to that week 1 matchup. You had 12 pressures between Clowney and Owe alone. They didn't have Van Noy at that point. Van Noy's been it's been just shocking to see how well he's played given how late they got him. And it's just
career year for him.
It's crazy. And what I think the big thing that I've kind of noticed when I go back to those first 2 to 3 to 4 weeks is they really weren't quite using their linebackers in the pass rush like they are now, where they're getting those kind of 6-man line looks where you got, Roquan and Patrick Queen directly at the line of scrimmage. And then, you're dropping an edge and sending them on a stunt type thing. I think that's the type of stuff that is really going to work against this Houston offensive line. Again, Laramie Tunsil is going to erase guys. That's just whoever's rushing against the left tackle, you're in for a long day. Whether that's going to be, it's probably going to be Owe and Van Noy because they're typically on that side. You usually see Clowney against the right tackle.
Yeah.
So, this is a game where you need Jadeveon Clowney to be that disruptive force that he can be. Against George Fant, I really like that matchup. He's a guy that can convert speed to power, really attack Fant's anchor. And then on the inside, you got Juice Scruggs now playing guard, and you got Michael Dieter playing center. And that is where my eyes are just – I'll be staring at that. When I talk about what I just talked about with our O-line, when I'm looking at their O-line, looking for 2 guys beside each other, it's those 2. That's where they're going to win this game. Shaq Mace is a beast. Again, they got that right guard and left tackle as kind of their big foundation. It's that left guard center where they're going to have to attack. That's where I'm going to want to see a lot of Matabike, and I really want to see those linebackers coming down on those disguised blitz looks where they can work the stunts, and that's where they've had so much success. It's just the athleticism that those 2 bring, and Queen and Rowe, it's insane to watch. So, but I'm also looking at the edge too, because you get a guy like Kyle Van Noy, a guy like Jadeveon Clowney that can win against a guy like George Fant. I think that's a piece of the game you can take advantage of. If you go back to their game plan against Cleveland, they were going against Myles Garrett and Zala Smith, 2 guys that are obviously very, very good.
Right.
What I noticed was CJ Stroud was bottom 5 in time to throw, where he's holding the ball a lot because he's got a little bit of that improvised ability, and they're pushing the ball downfield, so things got
underrated athlete for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So his TTT was 2.95 against the Browns. It was 2.4. That really tells me something. They wanted to get that ball out quick. How does that play into the Baltimore Ravens defense? They pushed the ball either downfield or into the flats almost exclusively. It felt like every play. CJ did throw some dots on the sideline. Again, not taking anything away from CJ Stroud, but as an overall strategy, that seemed to be what it was. I would say that plays into the Ravens' favor because guy that's down in those flats is a guy like Kyle Hamilton, where you're not going to get a whole lot of yak against him. You got a guy that can come downhill and in Geno Stone and make plays directly on the ball. You got corners like Stevens and Marlin that are physical, that will hit, that will tackle. Again, you go back to last year, a lot of missed tackles. Go back to the last 3 years, a lot of missed tackles. This year, not as much, right? Guys are always around the ball. So I think the speed, the athleticism that the Ravens can bring, a guy in that Cleveland game that made a lot of plays was JOK. And that's what you're getting every rep from a guy like Roquan, a guy from Patrick Queen. So I think that's very telling. So I think, I think this really does play. I think Mike McDonald's going to put, I really think they're going to pitch a good game against CJ Stroud. I'm going to regret saying this.
Man, I hope you're right. And you're giving me a little bit of confidence, man. I needed some I told some guys in the Discord earlier, I said, talk me up, man. I said, talk me up. I'm getting a little nervous. Like, just because it's playoff time, man, you never know what you're going to get. But you're encouraging me, man. I think, I like how we match
2019,
up against it.
man. There's a
Yeah.
lot of similarities. You got Mike Vrabel, D'Amico Ryans, former
Yeah.
player coaches that they just have these teams playing right.
Yeah.
They don't have I'm not comparing CJ Stroud to Ryan Tannehill, but they had
Ryan Tannehill was playing some good ball then, though.
And they had a stud in a guy like Derrick Henry, like a true.
Yeah, and it took a lot of pressure off of Ryan Tannehill.
That's it.
And
so
all he had to do was manage it and make a couple of good throws, make a couple of big plays. I always say, man, in the playoffs, like if you can turn the ball over and get big plays, you're likely to win. So
protecting the ball is so underrated. Like it doesn't get talked about enough. Like
man, like even in 2019 when we had Derrick Henry like having a heyday on our defense and literally turning around Earl Thomas, like we still could have been in that game if our receivers caught the ball. Like I remember like Seth Roberts dropping a likely touchdown, Mark Andrews with some drops, Willie Snead with some drops. Like this is a game where I feel, this is why we signed an Odell Beckham Jr. This is why we signed Nelson Aguilar and drafted Zay Flowers, because we're not just so dependent on a heavy run game and, throwing to the tight end. We can win in different ways now. We saw many times this season where we won, I think against the Rams, we won a shootout, right? We had to throw the ball a lot. Against Miami, pass heavy game plan, but we've also had some games where we've ran the ball efficiently and kind of managed the game a little bit, So I like the way we can win in different ways. One thing I want to ask you, because I saw this, and I'll let you go after this because I know I'm eating up your time.
Oh no!
But one more question.
Brother. I can do this all day.
So I saw this stat that CJ Stroud was significantly worse against man coverage versus zone coverage. I think he had the highest drop in QBR whenever you compared those two coverages. And I don't claim to be a film expert or anything like that, but I do think that the Ravens have run a lot more zone with Mike McDonald than they have with, Wink, right? Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, no, bang on.
So, do you think that this could be the game where we run some man concepts just to kind of switch it up? Do you trust a guy like Marcus Williams if we run like man free, just leaving a single high up there to kind of shade towards Nico Collins' way? And then I also think about like, how do you want to use Kyle Hamilton in this game? Because when I look at the Texans' weapons, it's Dalton Schultz, a talented tight end, and it's Nico Collins. Like those are the guys like that I feel like can really hurt you. So do you want to, keep Kyle manned up on Dalton, kind of erase that threat, and then leave a safety kind of shadowed towards Nico Collins and some man-free concepts? Do you think we're, adequate to run man concepts, or do you think we stick with our guns and run what we've been running all year?
Oh no, they're definitely in a position where they could run cover 2 a lot in this game and just take away those deep shots, keep Geno and Hamilton, or Geno and Williams deep, and then kind of man up, because you get a guy like Brandon Stevens, because they play sides, right? So Stevens plays one side, Marlon plays the other. So no one's going to be necessarily shadowing Nico around the field, but they do such a good job with trail technique and then getting that safety help over top. So, and this is the beauty of Mike McDonald, is he's not going to do just one thing. And that's kind of what it means. He doesn't have to change his game plan. He's got these concepts worked into every week. And these guys are repping this every week where, they can be so multiple. So I think that's what really gives him such an advantage as a defensive coordinator. But I do actually like the idea of going man, just because when you have two guys that are really doing the bulk of the big plays, I mean, if you can just really zero them in, if I'm Mike McDonald and that's my game plan, and then I'm like, okay, if a guy like Brevin Jordan beats me, if a guy like John Mechie, or I don't even know their third string wide receiver would beat me.
Well, I think they lost Noah Brown as well.
They did lose Noah Brown.
He was like 4th on their team in receiving yards. And they lost Tank Dell, who was a rookie sensation.
They got Xavier Hutchinson, kid out of Iowa State from this year, I think. So, I mean, they got some guys that can make plays, but I'm willing to live with that. If my best shot was I'm going to make John Mechie beat me, I think I'm going to take those odds, right? Like that's
Yeah.
sort of how I think he'll look at it. And this is just going to be one of those games where you're going to see so many different looks just because that's what he does every game. But, their ability, especially with Brandon Stevens, his ability to play trail technique and run with Nico Collins, that's something that they may trust really well because that's kind of been his strength all year. It's just, I'm going to run with you. I'm going to get that safety help over top. And now that his awareness is up, he's able to make plays directly on the football. So I think that's something that they could do really well. And then, flips to the other side and he's getting that physical coverage of Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah. I mean, I love what Brandon Stevens has done this year because I think this is one of the guys, if you're looking back at the season as a whole, like you could point to this player as one of the reasons why the defense had so much success. Because I remember, do you remember when the Ravens were making this guy go to safety, to corner, to nickel, to safety, to corner, like they were changing his position. And all of a sudden, Marlon Humphrey's dealing with an injury and they're like, no, you're just going to be our cornerback one going into the year. And he was like, cool. I got you. And he did. Like he really, I love his size. He 6'2", 215.
Yep.
He's physical, but he can run as well. And he's really improved his technique. So really, I'm stoked about what Brandon Stevens can do. And then I look at Nico Collins, who I think, I think he came out of Michigan. And Nico Collins of what, like 6'3", runs a 4.45. So 6'4". Yeah. So he's a big guy, strong, can run. And now I'm like, yeah, I think that's a good point that Brandon Stevens can, run with this guy. So you got any overall kind of overarching thoughts about this game? Maybe a score prediction or maybe how you could see the game scenario kind of playing out. How do you feel about it? Are you nervous? Are you just fired up? How do you feel about it?
Based on my playoff bracket, you guys may not want to listen to me, but I feel weirdly confident about this game, and I hate it. I hate when I feel confident because holy crap, do you ever set yourself up for any disappointment? But I seriously think this is a game where, like, I'm going to say 27-13. That I really think that's this type of game. I think CJ Stroud is going to be a top 5 quarterback in this league. I just think I don't know how you come into Baltimore, into the bank, with 2 guys that are going to make plays for you on offense and beat Mike McDonald in this defense. That's really no disrespect to what they're doing.
I like that simplistic look at it right there. That's all I needed to hear. I love it.
It kind of reminds me of when, like the Dolphins were down Waddle, right? And you only got you had a guy like Cedric Wilson make a play in that game. But they were able to just kind of limit Tyreek Hill. I mean, I think he had like 80 yards, but based on what he's been doing all year, that was pretty much limiting him.
You'll take it.
So, I mean, it's that type of game where, Nico will get his, he'll have some yards. But if you can limit that big play, if you can force them to play Baltimore Ravens football, force them to have to run the ball in the red zone, play physical, the way Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey play physical in the red zone, it's a thing of beauty just watching that type of football. So I really think it's that type of game. And I did say this in 2019 and look what happened. So again, the 2 keys, you protect the football and you win in the trenches, you will be successful on Saturday.
I like it. So Cole, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Why don't you let everyone know where they can find your work?
Absolutely. Road Graders with Cole Jackson. You have to search with Cole Jackson. If you search just Road Graders, you will just find literal road graders, construction equipment. So make sure you search Road Graders with Cole Jackson.
I'll make sure to put that information in the description below so you guys can directly go to his channel. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. I'm fired up for this playoff matchup. Just in a couple of days, we're already Monday night and we got a game on Saturday, baby. So let's go. So thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's content, make sure to smash the like button, hit that subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on all of your Baltimore Ravens news. Tomorrow, we got Kadre Ismail coming on, and we're excited for that one as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.